Incredible 12-year-old girl dares to save a pregnant officer from a speeding van. Discover how. Emma Thompson rarely considered herself extraordinary. Just another 12-year-old at Maplewood Middle School. She melted into the background, overshadowed by the vibrant personalities of her classmates. But that day, everything changed in a flash. As she walked home, sunlight filtering through the trees lining Main Street, a sharp screech of tires jerked her upright. Truly instinctively, her eyes widened in disbelief as a van careened down the road, speeding toward Officer Kelly, who was directing traffic with her authoritative but gentle demeanor. In that heart-stopping moment, time warped. Her world narrowed to the frantic vision of danger unfolding before her. The values instilled by her mother flooded her mind: loyalty, bravery, selflessness. Was this what she was supposed to do? Could she be the one to intervene? Emma felt a violent knot in her stomach as adrenaline surged, a desperate urge pulling her forward. But fear tangled inside her. What if she was too late? If she hesitated now, Officer Kelly would be hurt. Emma couldn't let that happen, wouldn't let that happen. This was her chance to act, to prove not just to others, but to herself that she could rise above. Before she could second-guess herself, she sprinted into the street, a burst of motion amidst chaos. Time resumed as she shoved Officer Kelly out of the van's path, narrowly avoiding disaster. The sound of crumpling metal echoed, followed by a stunned silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity. She could hardly breathe, her heart racing from more than just physical exertion. Was it bravery or sheer panic that propelled her forward? Her mind was a whirlpool of pride mixed with dread, a new weight pressing down on her chest, the realization that she was now branded a hero. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every passing day, Emma's life morphed under the scrutiny of newfound fame. Whispers and glances followed her through school hallways, eyes widened in awe or narrowed with envy. Emma had never been the center of attention, especially not like this. The smiles of approval from her mother brought warmth, yet the burden of becoming Maplewood's unexpected hero sent tremors through her. Then came Jake, who now bore a vendetta against Emma's status, mocking her at lunch while others laughed. Each cutting comment pierced her resolve, forcing her to confront a deeper fear. Was she truly courageous, or merely a fluke? Emma wrestled with the shadow of her actions. Had she saved a life, only to risk another? Overhearing whispers about Officer Kelly's worsening condition compounded her turmoil, spiraling her further into despair. Emma stood at a tumultuous crossroads, the weight of expectations suffocating as she struggled to define what being a hero meant in her own eyes. Should she embrace this title, or shrink back into the shadows she once knew so well? Each step she took seemed to echo louder than her thoughts, building toward an irreversible clash with Jake, a confrontation looming closer, fueling her inner chaos. The air thickened with tension, anticipation tightening around her throat as she braced herself for what lay ahead. Emma was on the brink of something monumental, and the question loomed large. Would she crack under pressure, or find the strength she never knew she had? As the days wore on, Emma found herself trapped in an internal storm, wrestling with her identity. In the school hallways, whispers morphed into shouts, and laughter became a painful reminder of her acute vulnerability. The simple act of walking from class to class became a battlefield where she felt not just the burden of heroism, but the sharpness of ridicule. Jake's taunts rang out like a bell, each jeer a relentless attack on her self-worth. "You think saving a cop makes you special, Emma? What kind of hero gets bullied in the lunchroom?" The words sunk deep into her skin, igniting a fire of frustration that nearly bubbled over. Emma's instinct was to retreat, but the nemesis of confidence pressed her forward. She needed to confront the doubts swirling around her, to dig deep and challenge that cynical voice echoing in her mind. That Saturday, she decided, would be different. Emma stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. The girl staring back appeared unfamiliar. She was both the girl who had risked everything and the girl who struggled with fear. She felt a newfound determination burgeoning within her. This was not just about proving herself to others, it was about cultivating that bravery from within. After a long moment, she pulled on her sneakers, her mind made up for action rather than inaction. Taking a deep breath, she stepped outside, squinting against the brilliant sun that illuminated the street.
With each step, Emma visualized a different narrative. Instead of fleeing from Jake, she would confront him. She would carve out her own definition of a hero, not shaped by others' expectations or taunts, but defined by her own choices. Arriving at the park, where Jake often hung out with his friends, Emma felt her heart hammer against her ribs. Just a few feet away, she spotted him, slouched against a tree, laughing with his friend Ben. It was time. "Jake," she called out, her voice steady but tinged with anxiety.
His laughter faded, and he turned, surprise flickering across his face. "What do you want? Looking for another chance to play hero?" The scorn in his tone cut sharp, like a blade. "I want to talk," she replied, forcing her voice not to shake. "No jokes, just you and me." Reluctantly, he sauntered over, the casual swagger masking his curiosity. "About what? You think I care about your little drama?" "I think you care about respect. And maybe, if you gave me a chance, you'd see there's more to being a hero than saving someone." She felt the weight of her own challenge. Could she articulate her feelings in a way that resonated with him? Jake scoffed, but she pressed on. "Your mocks are hurtful, but I'm not just a fluke. I acted in a moment of fear, and I'm still figuring out what that means for me. Maybe you, of all people, could understand that feeling of being pushed into a corner." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his eyes. She saw a glimmer of recognition, a hint of realization. But before she could gather her strength to continue, he replied, "Whatever, Emma. Good luck with your little hero journey. Just don't think it means you're above anyone. You're still just a kid." The dismissive comment landed heavily, but Emma stood firm. A sense of purpose kindled within her. Yes, she was still navigating the choppy waters of childhood and growing pains. But claiming her story, facing Jake, and not backing down was its own kind of victory. She turned to leave, but not before glancing back. "Just remember, Jake, everyone struggles. It doesn't make them less worthy." With that, she walked away, heart pounding, yet lighter than before. Emma didn't know how this confrontation would change her dynamic with Jake, but she could feel a shift, a glimmer of empowerment that hinted at potential growth. As she approached home, determination settled in her gut. Tomorrow she would take another step, digging deeper into the roots of who she wanted to become. She wasn't waiting for accolades. She was on a personal mission of self-discovery. The jagged path ahead whispered of discoveries yet to come. But in the back of her mind, lingering like an unwanted shadow, was the question, what if Jake decided to escalate this feud? A fresh wave of tension surged through her. Fighting this battle could lead to dangerous territory she wasn't prepared for. Saturday morning dawned bright and crisp, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in Emma's mind. The echoes of her confrontation with Jake replayed in her thoughts, igniting both pride and a gnawing anxiety. Each step she took reminded her of the courage it took to face him, yet uncertainty began to creep in. Had she made a difference? Would he truly reconsider her? Determined to take another stride toward her evolving identity, Emma decided to immerse herself in her passion, art. Painting had always been her refuge, a canvas where she could express emotions words often failed to capture.
A few weeks prior, she'd started a project inspired by her experience. It was a piece symbolizing bravery and vulnerability. Arriving at her quiet art nook in the corner of the garage, she pulled out her brushes and canvas, the scent of paint reigniting her zeal. Emma mixed vibrant colors, subconsciously channeling her inner conflict onto the canvas. With each stroke, she found herself lost in the rhythm of creation, where bristle met canvas, and each splash of color represented an emotion she could not voice. Suddenly, Emma halted. A flicker of doubt passed through her. What if her art didn't matter? Would anyone even understand the depth behind it? The thought clawed at her. Was she really brave, or was she simply hiding behind her paintbrushes? But instead of retreating, she questioned that shadowed voice. Why must she seek validation from others? Taking a deep breath, she picked up her brush once more. This time she painted with conviction. This was more than just a project. It was her personal declaration. This was her story, brimming with fears and triumphs. The process transformed her cage of self-doubt into a sanctuary of self-acceptance. Hours slipped away as she became engrossed in the colors, shapes, and her evolving vision. She realized that her art was more than a means of expression. It was an invitation to explore her thoughts and feelings, a chance to confront her tumultuous experiences rather than run from them. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue over her painted world, she stepped back to survey her work, an abstract portrayal of a figure standing defiantly against swirling chaos, hues of courage intertwined with strokes of vulnerability. She felt a rush of pride as she contemplated the underlying message. Acceptance of imperfection was in itself an act of bravery. That evening, Emma made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of waiting for an opportunity to unveil her art to the school or her friends, she would share it on social media. Perhaps that external validation was not what was needed, but she wanted to create a dialogue. Maybe others were struggling too, and if her art resonated, if just one person felt a spark of understanding, it would be worth it. However, with the click of the upload button, a wave of anxiety washed over her. What if Jake saw it? What if he chose to mock her again, tearing down the courage she was desperately trying to build? The fear of judgment loomed large, but she balanced it with the weight of purpose. As she lay in bed that night, contemplating the journey ahead, Emma felt a sense of resolve harden within her. She knew confronting her fears would not be easy, but like the brushstrokes that formed her masterpiece, she would navigate it one careful decision at a time. In the midst of this self-discovery, she received a notification. Curious, she turned her phone screen towards her. It was a comment on her post. She held her breath as she read it, heart racing.
The words sent a shiver down her spine. This was not an isolated moment. Others were watching, engaging, and most importantly, ready to connect. But just as that glimmer of hope sparked within her, another notification dropped. A message from Jake. Nice art, but I bet it's not as tough as saving a life. And in that instant, Emma knew she stood on the precipice of a deeper conflict. The air buzzed with tension as the notifications chimed, pulling Emma abruptly from her reverie. She felt the sting of Jake's comment lingering like a bitter echo. It was as if he had thrust her directly into a fresh battlefield, equipped only with her paintbrush and the raw scars of her past. The weight of his words crushed her optimism, creating an internal discord that reverberated through her resolve. Emma paced her room, glancing at her illuminated phone. She had expected the comment section to be filled with encouragement, not a reminder of Jake's dismissive persona. Why did his opinions still penetrate so deeply? She recalled his earlier taunts, the way he had wielded his words like weapons. That night, lying awake, she resolved not to let him undermine her any longer. Determined to reclaim her narrative, Emma leveraged the discontent stirred by Jake's comment. She opened her sketchbook, channeling her frustration into lines and colors, transforming them into an artistic confrontation. Each stroke carried the weight of her insult, but bathed in a layer of resilience. This was not merely art. It was a declaration of independence from the shadows of negativity. Morning light filtered through her window, illuminating her partially completed piece. Spirals of coercive emotions twisted and turned. Instead of hiding from Jake's hurtful remarks, she now faced them with unrelenting creativity. The need for validation from Jake or anyone else began to dissipate, replaced by an urgent desire to engage with her truth, untouched by external judgment. As days passed, Emma received a flurry of reactions to her post, some encouraging, others critical. Each one acted as a mirror, reflecting not just the world's perception, but her evolving facets. She learned to sift through comments like grains of sand, discerning constructive feedback from mere noise. This newfound discernment became her armor, fortifying her against the sting of ridicule. Buoyed by supportive responses, she began to forge connections with fellow budding artists online. She found space to discuss her motivations, fears, and aspirations. These conversations became both inspiring and opening. Among them, she discovered that her vulnerability resonated with many, normalizing fears that once felt weighty and isolating. The dynamic between art and identity began to crystallize within Emma. Painting no longer felt like an escape. It was an assertion of who she was becoming, a voice that claimed space in the world.
She noticed a shift within herself. Every layer she added to her canvas served as a reminder that the essence of bravery was not merely in confrontations, but in continuous self-reclamation. With each completed piece, she was allured deeper into the art community and soon began contemplating her first group exhibition. The thought nudged her with excitement and panic alike. What if her earlier anxieties returned, compounded by the tangible pressure of public scrutiny? Yet the excitement lingered, daring her to embrace this next challenge. As she stood before her current piece, titled Defiance Against Chaos, Emma saw not just swirls of color, but her journey crystallized into a visual narrative. It wasn't solely about her act of defiance against Jake's belittling comment. It encapsulated the metamorphosis from self-doubt to self-acceptance. Every brushstroke felt like an echo of her internal transformation, a testament to a deeper understanding of her self-worth apart from Jake's approval. But just as she immersed herself in this realization, her phone buzzed again, dragging her attention violently away. It was another message from Jake. "Exhibiting your work? Talk about trying too hard. Is this even worth it?" The impudent taunt hung in the air like a specter, reminding her of the very confrontation she had fought so hard to rise above. Emma's heart raced at the thought of stepping into a world where she might face Jake again, but instead of recoiling, she took a deep breath. The time had come to face both her art and the haunting figure from her past once more. Emma sat down at her easel, determined to drown out Jake's words. With every brushstroke, she willed herself to create a world that transcended his belittlement. The vibrant colors swirled together, a representation of her conflicted emotions, yet they birthed a sense of purpose. This was more than just paint on canvas. It was her battle cry against negativity. As the strokes came alive under her hand, the energy she infused into the piece became a living testament to her resolve. The looming exhibition weighed on her mind, something she observed only distantly. The morning sun poured warmth into her studio, meeting the shadows of her doubts like old acquaintances. She made herself a promise. I would take the plunge, not to seek validation, but to authentically express my journey. The thought propelled her into action. She'd invite people into her world, her struggle, and her triumph. Days turned into weeks as she meticulously prepared her portfolio for the exhibition. Each chosen piece offered a glimpse into her evolution. Seeking out local galleries, Emma expanded her boundaries. She crafted an email laden with her intentions and a few images of her work before pressing send, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The fast-paced digital age allowed for immediacy. Her heart raced as she wondered how far her reach extended.
Reinforced by the support she had cultivated online, Emma decided to confront Jake in a different way. She invited him to the exhibition. It would be her statement, an act of reclamation to prove she belonged in any creative space she chose. The invitation felt like both a surrender and a challenge. Jake's poisonous commentary had reignited her fight. She wanted him to witness her transformation, bask in the glow of her growth. The night of the exhibit arrived, enveloped in an intoxicating mixture of excitement and dread. The gallery's high ceilings loomed, and she felt the weight of her creations tower around her like guardians in waiting. Not just paintings, but pieces of her heart laid bare for the world to see. As people began to trickle in, Emma reminded herself that every brushstroke was imbued with her story, each line defined not just by her experiences, but by her resilience. As conversations began, praise echoed through the room. A stranger's admiration of her work emboldened her spirit. Yet amidst the applause, a familiar face stood at the entrance, Jake. It was almost like a scene in a haunting film where the protagonist comes face to face with their antagonist. Anxiety rippled through her, but instead of letting it consume her, she took a breath and leaned into it, channeling the strength she had cultivated. Determined to navigate this confrontation with grace, Emma approached Jake as he surveyed her pieces with an uninterested demeanor. This was a test, a moment that could easily slip back into insecurity or propel her forward. She greeted him with a calm smile, embodying everything she had strived for. The tension in the air coiled tighter, a battlefield set only for them. "Didn't expect to see you here," Emma said, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. Jake turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Thought it might be amusing to see you attempt to showcase your little hobby," he replied, dismissively. Emma felt the urge to retreat from the comment, but she remembered their respective paths. She wasn't just an artist anymore. She embodied someone who refused to hide. This moment was hers. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing to her artwork. "It's more than just a hobby to me. It's a reflection of my journey and what I overcame." For a moment, the air hung thick between them, as if the entire gallery had fallen silent to witness this exchange. The words lingered, a challenge posed, but Emma discovered something within herself, a hidden power that had long been dormant. Would she allow this moment to be yet another instance where Jake's opinions dictated her reality?
As the exhibition buzzed with conversations around them, Emma squared her shoulders, ready to redefine this encounter and maybe finally put Jake's opinion where it belonged. Yet the uncertainty in his gaze and her own rising determination whispered that this was merely the beginning of a deeper conflict unfolding beyond the art.
Emma stood in the midst of vibrant conversations and the murmurs of admiration that enveloped her like a warm embrace. Yet the moment Jake had arrived so unpredictably cast a shadow on her feelings of triumph. The gallery buzz around her felt muffled, a surreal backdrop to the confrontation that loomed. She scrutinized Jake's expression, deciphering the subtle shift from arrogance to momentary bewilderment. It almost made her smile, but instead she focused on the cracks in his mask of indifference. This wasn't just about art, it was about reclaiming her narrative. Could she turn this moment, the old dialogue simmering with resentment, into an opportunity for newfound clarity? As she navigated the space, mingling with guests, she felt the distinct atmosphere shift when Jake's piercing gaze lingered on her. People admired her pieces, but it was her conversation with each viewer that tethered her to a deeper understanding of her own journey. With each exchange, she recognized the power of her voice wasn't merely a ripple, it was a wave capable of reshaping perceptions, both in herself and others. When the event began to wind down, Emma saw Jake detaching from the crowd, seemingly unconcerned about leaving. She hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether to let him go without further engagement. But as she recalled his condescending remarks, they fueled her determination. "Jake," she called out, surprising even herself with the firmness of her tone. His head turned, revealing a flicker of disbelief. "You should really talk to me before you go. I want you to understand why this means so much to me." His expression softened, perhaps feeling the weight of her unyielding resolve. Emma moved closer, brushing past a small group who seemed oblivious to the tension she commanded. In that moment, the exterior facade of her creations shifted. They were no longer just paintings on a wall, but portals of her life experiences. "Why are you so compelled to doubt my work?" she questioned, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "You dismissed my passion for too long. Why not confront what you missed?" A moment passed where he appeared vulnerable, a contrast to the indifference he had wielded. "Because it makes me uncomfortable," he finally admitted, almost reluctantly. "I can't fathom how you've managed to turn pain into beauty." This admission hung in the air, a revelation that shifted the dynamic of their interaction. For the first time, Emma saw not an opponent, but a person grappling with his own insecurities. What once felt like an insurmountable obstacle now seemed like a bridge, fragile yet existent. "But that comfort doesn't define my worth," Emma pressed, a newfound clarity strengthening her voice. "My art, my journey, has taught me that embracing discomfort can lead to authenticity. Wouldn't you want that freedom for yourself?" As she spoke, the crowd began to disperse, but her eyes remained locked on Jake's, as if channeling every ounce of her conviction. The truth surged through her like electricity, empowering her to lay out the foundation of her identity bare before him. Their previous dynamic had shifted, turning antagonism into a dialogue ripe with potential discovery. Jake swallowed, visibly reflecting on her words. "Maybe I've been wrong," he finally acknowledged, breaking the silence. Hope mingled with skepticism. Was this actually a moment of transformation, or merely a flicker of temporary admission? Emma's heart raced, aware that one interaction wouldn't erase the past, but it could pave the way for understanding, and that was worth something. As they stood in the fading glow of the gallery lights, Emma recognized that her battle with Jake was only beginning. The tension between her artistic vision and his expectations opened a dialogue that was far less about winning than it was about connection. But amid the unfolding shift, a sudden gust of wind swept through the gallery, knocking over a small display. The loud crash redirected the attention of the remaining guests, and Emma's heart leapt with realization. She wasn't just fighting with Jake for personal truth, she was on the verge of forging something entirely new from their jagged history. Changing dynamics, original narratives, and the world of art lay before her. Yet even as she leaned into this newfound potential, another question bubbled within her, a question that loomed larger than her confrontation with Jake. What would it take for her to fully embrace both her identity and the world of creative expression? And as the chaos in the gallery settled, Emma realized that an even greater challenge awaited her, one where she would have to navigate this path of newfound connections and create even deeper expressions of her truth. The pressure built as she prepared to face not only her own reflection, but also an art community eager to embrace new voices. But amidst this burgeoning hope, she pained cheap the feeling that the struggle against doubt, both internal and external, was just beginning.
Emma stepped outside into the cool evening air, the rhythmic hum of city life anchoring her thoughts. The gallery's warmth began to dissipate, leaving a lingering buzz in her mind. The confrontation with Jake had shifted something profound within her, and despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, she felt invigorated. Every breath filled her with a sense of purpose. The mingling of doubt and determination fueled her resolve. That night marked a new chapter, both personally and professionally. As she strolled along the pavement, the lights from nearby cafes and street vendors illuminated her path, yet she felt drawn into the darkness of her own introspection. How could she transform this moment, this dialogue with Jake, into her artistic expression? Was there an expansive, untapped reservoir of vulnerability that she could articulate through her work?
Underneath her thoughtful facade, Emma understood that the confrontation was not solely about Jake. It forced her to confront her own relationship with fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. It had been easy to channel her pain into art when she was removed from it, but now she needed to navigate those tumultuous waters with authenticity. Back in her studio, the scent of paint and turpentine greeted her like an old friend. She paused to look at her latest piece, half-finished yet pregnant with potential. The canvas pulsed with the echoes of her heart, fragments of her struggles laid bare in color and texture. She picked up her brush, recalling Jake's admission about discomfort. "Turn pain into beauty," she murmured to herself. What beauty could emerge from her own discomfort? What truths did she need to confront to let her art fully breathe? Emma dipped her brush into hues of brilliant cerulean, allowing the colors to bleed and swirl. Each stroke felt like a counterbalance against the darkness of doubt. Yet in moments of inspiration, unbidden thoughts surfaced. What would her peers think? Would critics embrace this more visceral side of her work, or would it invite scrutiny? This nagging inner dialogue flittered at the edges of her consciousness, threatening to unravel her focus. The need for validation clashed with her artistic vision, an internal war that demanded resolution. She set her brush down, the silence around her now heavy, her breath shallow. Was she ready to put forth a piece that reflected her raw emotions, a canvas that dared to expose her vulnerabilities? In this moment of stillness, Emma understood that confronting Jake had been a catalyst, igniting a fire within her that longed for expression. Guarding her insecurities, she contemplated the possibility of inviting a few trusted fellow artists to view her new work, a move that filled her with both excitement and trepidation. What if their reactions mirrored Jake's past dismissals? Yet, as she recognized the truth in her own artistic voice, she understood that she could not allow the fear of judgment to bind her creativity. The trembling resolve transformed into a clearer mission. Emma would push through the discomfort, not merely for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced by fear. Through her art, she could advocate for authenticity, and in doing so, she could sharpen her narrative further. Energized, she returned to the canvas, unleashing shades of red to contrast against the calming blues, reflections of her inner turmoil alongside her pursuit of clarity. As she worked through the night, slices of insight pierced her psyche. This was more than just a painting. It was a manifesto of her resilience. In the vibrant strokes, she could almost see the emerging dialogue with Jake transforming into a broader conversation about identity, one that would reverberate through her future works and beyond. But even as she felt a newfound sense of clarity, an unresolved tension lingered, a whisper that reminded her Jake's journey was intertwined with hers. Would he continue to struggle with his discomfort, or would this chance encounter resonate with him too? Emma couldn't shake the anticipation of what their next dialogue would breed. Her brush hesitated above the canvas, a moment of stillness before the storm. The deeper revelation awaited, one that might lay her vulnerability bare, but it was also fortified by her resolve to create beauty from the chaos. What direction would their complex narrative take next? Emma felt her heart race. The moment of truth was approaching. As the sun began to rise, washing the studio in golden light, Emma stood before her canvas, a riot of colors vying for attention. The vibrancy seemed to hum along with her racing thoughts. She had immersed herself so deeply in the creation process that time had become an ephemeral concept, sliding through her fingers like wet paint. Yet, as the first rays of dawn illuminated her work, a creeping unease settled in her chest. The image she had brought to life was not merely a reflection of her struggles. It was a mirror demanding honesty about the depths of her turmoil and the responsibilities that came with her art.
Each brushstroke felt heavy, imbued with the weight of expectations, hers and others. Emma wiped the sweat from her brow and stepped back to survey her work. The reds cried out, demanding acknowledgement of her pain, while the calming blues seemed to whisper of hope. But was she ready to expose this raw vulnerability before an audience? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. What if people didn't understand? What if they saw only weakness rather than bravery in her openness? She knew the path of an artist was rarely walked without scrutiny. There had been countless accounts of creators who succumbed to the fear of judgment, burying their truth beneath layers of conventionality. This inner conflict surged forth, and she felt the familiar gnawing doubt rear its ugly head once more. The challenge ahead was clear: embrace authenticity or retreat into comfortable obscurity. Gradually, her apprehension began to morph into a burgeoning determination. She recalled Jake's immense discomfort during their last exchange. Perhaps discomfort wasn't something to fear, but rather a road sign guiding her to a deeper understanding of herself and her audience. Perhaps it was the very key to unlocking unfiltered connection. Taking a steadying breath, Emma lifted her brush and began blending the colors, allowing her emotions to drop freely onto the canvas. She worked furiously, the previous uncertainties morphing into fuel, lifting her spirit higher. Each stroke liberated a layered story within her, seeking to bridge the gap between vulnerability and beauty. After hours lost in the dance of pigment and texture, the piece began to take shape.
It stood before her, a chaotic yet harmonious embodiment of her growth. She could almost hear the burgeoning whispers of others, their thoughts evolving as they approached her canvas. The prospect of displaying it felt less daunting, now alive with possibility. Potential connections filled with empathy and shared experience shimmered in the back of her mind. As evening descended once more, her resolve crystallized. She would invite a few fellow artists to witness her latest creation, this delicate balance of vulnerability and strength, hoping they might embrace her truth rather than dismiss it. The thought thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. This was her moment, a decision that could either lift her or lead her to further scrutiny. Yet just as she prepared to compose her invitation, a sudden pang of hesitation overwhelmed her. What if the reactions unveiled truths about her work that she wasn't prepared to confront? What if their perceptions shifted the narrative she had so carefully constructed? Emma gripped the edge of her studio table, heart racing, the anticipation of both acceptance and rejection colliding in a tempest of longing and fear. Determined to own this vulnerability, she carefully crafted her invitation, each word resonating with her commitment to an honest artistic journey. Before sending it off, she paused to breathe deeply and remind herself, this wasn't just about her, it was a chance to speak to others who also wrestled with fear. In that moment, Emma realized the impending confrontation with her fellow artists would be a reflection of her own complexities, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the next step in her journey might lead to even darker revelations about her thoughts on authenticity. Was she prepared to face the full spectrum of her artistic soul laid bare? The click of the send button echoed in the silence, sending ripples through her anticipation for what would come next. Would her bravest act resonate beyond her studio walls, or would it unveil disappointments she had yet to face? Emma uneasily embraced the reality. The time had come to face both the art and herself in a more profound way. The following days were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Emma turned her focus inward, replaying the moment she had sent on the invitation over and over in her mind. The responses from her fellow artists trickled in, each one a tiny jolt to her already heightened senses. Some were warm and encouraging, others merely polite. Yet that was the nature of artistic communities, an unpredictable mix of support and indifference. As the day of their visit approached, Emma transformed from a vibrant painter into a restless bundle of jitters. Each morning began with her standing before her canvas, re-evaluating her work with scrutinizing eyes. What had once felt like a powerful revelation now loomed over her as a potential failure.
The very thing she created to express her authenticity felt like a noose tightening around her neck. What if they didn't see the nuances she intended, the intricate play of emotions that wove through every inch of paint? On top of her artistic fears, she wrestled with the idea of her identity as an artist. Had she painted a true reflection of herself, or merely expressed what she thought they wanted to see? A creeping thought nagged at her. Perhaps her journey into vulnerability was merely a one-sided conversation, not a bridge to understanding. As she scrubbed at her paintbrushes, the usual comfort of the paint on her fingers began to dry into stress. She paced her tiny studio, inhaling the scent of turpentine and linseed oil that usually invigorated her creativity, but now soured into a cloying reminder of her upcoming trial. What would they think? And more importantly, what would she think of herself once exposed? On the day of the gathering, she prepared mentally and physically, donning her favorite paint-splattered overalls, a uniform she hoped would instill bravery. Her heart raced as the first few artists trickled into her studio, their eyes wide with curiosity, yet softened by camaraderie. She offered nervous smiles, each one returned with unspoken encouragement. As discussions started to swirl, she could feel the energy in the room tense and expand like a living entity. They admired her work, the colors igniting a flurry of conversation. Initially, their praise washed over her like a balm, soothing her frazzled nerves. But as they delved deeper into their critiques, their focus shifted on her intention, their questions becoming sharper, cutting through her skin like a blade. "What were you feeling when you made this?" one artist asked, probing. "What did that shade of red represent for you?" Each question drew her deeper into the labyrinth of her emotions, and she struggled to articulate the vulnerabilities she poured onto the canvas. The room began to fade as she ventured into her own headspace, the artist's eyes piercing, searching for her truths. Was she exposing a tender part of herself, or merely lambasting others with her insecurities? Then she heard Jake's voice from the crowd. "Emma, the way you wield those colors is a battle cry. What if you leaned into that?" He was right. Everything, the reds, the blues, the chaos, was a call to arms, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever felt lost. Inspired, Emma found herself standing taller, her voice gaining strength. Each response unveiled another layer of herself, another hidden truth. And in that moment of connection and confrontation, something shifted. Their inquiries didn't feel like accusations, but rather a collective challenge to explore deeper, both themselves and her art. As the evening wore on, Emma experienced an exhilarating shift. The fear began to dissipate, replaced by clarity and newfound confidence. She realized that confronting the uncertainties was not just a one-way street. It was a collaborative journey, one that could weave them all together through the richness of shared vulnerability. But as glasses clinked and laughter erupted, a disquiet still lingered in Emma's heart. Had she really ventured deep enough? In the quiet after the last guest departed, she stood again before her canvas, her heart pounding with a question that felt too complex to voice. What hidden truth still lay waiting in the depths of her soul, yearning to be expressed? With fading light casting shadows in every corner, she wondered if her exploration of authenticity had merely scratched the surface of something far more profound than she had anticipated. Could she truly summon the courage to embrace the depths of her unconscious and lay bare even more of her soul? The canvas stared back, its potential limitless, and Emma took a deep breath as a wave of determination washed over her once again. The time had come to dig deeper, but what would she unearth in the process?
No longer was she defined by Jake's ridicule or the anxiety of potential rejection. Instead, she wore her identity like armor, crafted through acts of bravery and self-acceptance. During the unveiling of her newest piece, a vibrant portrayal of the tumultuous emotions she had navigated, Emma felt a rush of fulfillment. She articulated the concept behind it, her words flowing with the confidence born from understanding her journey. This isn't just an expression of chaos, it's a tribute to resilience. Every color represents a piece of my adventure. Pain, joy, vulnerability. It reflects not just my story, but the collective human experience. The audience hung on her every word, captivated, a connection forming and weaving between her and the crowd. In that shared space, their empathetic nods and smiles validated the authenticity she embraced, not just for herself, but for all who had faced similar struggles. As the night unfolded, she spotted Jake slip into the gallery. Unexpected nerves fluttered her stomach, but instead of shying away, she approached him with a newfound sense of empowerment. "Jake," she greeted, "I'm glad you could make it." His demeanor was different, softened, and introspective. "I came to see what your art was all about," he said, the scorn from earlier encounters replaced with an unfamiliar respect. "I'd love to hear your thoughts," Emma offered, genuinely eager to engage. To her surprise, Jake approached her most vulnerable piece, captivated by the raw emotions it evoked. "You know, I didn't expect this," he confessed. "It's powerful. We've all had our fights, maybe not outwardly, but within ourselves." In that moment, the tides shifted. The tension that defined their previous relationship began to dissolve, replaced by an opportunity for mutual understanding. Emma realized that confronting their challenges could lead to growth, not just individually, but collaboratively. As the evening came to a close, Emma stood before her completed work, no longer plagued by doubt, but filled with a palpable sense of achievement. She had proved to herself that she was more than just a hero of a moment. She was an artist weaving tales of resilience through every brushstroke. Walking out of the gallery, she felt the weight of the past lift, borne away by the winds of change. A renewed passion flourished within her, a commitment to continue exploring the depths of her journey in art. Emma knew now that every struggle held a lesson, every triumph was a step forward, and her story was far from over. So much had shifted, she didn't merely reclaim her narrative, but shaped a destiny aligned with her values of courage, creativity, and authenticity. In those radiant moments of recognition, she had finally become the individual she had always aspired to be, not just an artist, but a pioneer of her own life story. The journey ahead was uncertain, but that was part of the beauty.
Emma was ready to embrace it, for she knew that true growth came from remaining in the canvas of life and allowing each day to add new colors to her evolving masterpiece. Now, it's your moment. You need to subscribe now to keep up with incredible journeys of personal achievement. This is the moment to show your support for stories like Emma's. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure these powerful narratives continue to unfold. Comment your thoughts on this final chapter and share your own interpretations. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion.